well, not kind of an unfortunate circumstance, is the fact that Grace Ritz has taken ill and is feeling indisposed. But Grace also, and most of us, many of us know Grace and know and respect her poetry. She also runs, or is part of a writers group, and one of the members of that group, Mary Callahan, has agreed to read Grace's poetry today. But she's also going to read some of her own poetry in the open reading that precedes. So I'm inviting at this time anyone who has anything who wants to read in the open reading to come up, and if not, Mary, you can get started.
Do you want to read first?
I'm sorry?
I thought maybe you wanted to read some poem.
Do you have anything with you, Ricky? Do you have anything?
I could. Really.
Okay. Well,
okay.
I'm sorry, it's a little bit awkward, but I'm the awkward one.
Would you mind that?
Yeah, I would. Ricky's okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
Is this set up for short people? Is it okay?
You just pull it down.
Get them all in microphone. How's that? That's good. Okay. I'll read 2 poems. Unless you'd rather I didn't. Or you could just read one. Okay. It's called Sardines. Rewinding the key, re-rolling the tin, closing it up again. No trace of the taste of sweet tomato, or the salty sea kiss, or the crest of waves anymore. Only rancid fish oil. Rewinding the key, re-rolling the tin, sealing up the sardines. I would rather swim alone in the great sea than be stuck in the can with you. As a memorial Sunday for someone I cared about a lot. I haven't seen him that much in the last 7 years or so. He used to sing in a band called The Thirds. Any of you heard of them? The Thirds? They sang for like 15 years, once a week at Nietzsche's. His name was Charlie O'Neill. So I had written this a long time ago. So I'm going to read this poem. Charlie at sunrise. And there's reference to town restaurant, the Greeks. At the Greeks, scant minutes before dawn's red-eyed arrival, I noticed the freckles on Charlie's arms, our conversation punctuated by deliveries of spoons and coffee. Friendship's dawn spreads around us a rose-tint glow, freckled with sudden sparks of laughter. I tell him about falling in love with men I see walking down the street for just one moment of devouring eye intake, perfection at high pitch for a microsecond, perfect stranger, perfect lover, perfect silence, perfect fantasy. His souvlaki poised in midair, Charlie smiled, remembering the same sort of moment with women he's seen but will never meet. Years ago, I watched with love-blazed eyes as Charlie sang in a band, with his eyes shut tight in concentration, ecstasy transfiguring his face like a mystic. But I do not tell him. I am sitting with my own myth, a red-headed Adonis. Never expected he would converse with mere mortal. Well, I certainly don't mention, to fight the sphenocopoda, that he has been a surprise. Watching Charlie sip his coffee and gently cradle the warm cup, my first revelation of his radiance returns. He was leaning on a littered countertop, tending bar, and listening, just then, to a drunk patron intently as he listened to a note within. This is what the Buddha meant by opening the heart. No deaf ear ever, finely tuned tenderness, turns around from the cash register like some rare orchid expecting no favor for its extraordinary violent rush. White firelight pouring out from his chest, laugh-crinkled corners of eyes, morning sunflower smile, all grace shining through. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to do two things at one time. I'm going to introduce Mary Callahan, and then I'm going to introduce Mary Callahan reading for Grace Ritz. Rather than come up here again and introduce Mary twice, I would like to simply say that I've known Grace for a long time. I knew her even before I knew she had any affiliation with Rosary Hill / Daemen. She's one person who probably had a longer affiliation with Daemen than I have. I mean, there are a few of those. I was looking forward immensely to hearing Grace read tonight. I'm very sad that she's not feeling well, but I'm sure Mary is going to do an extremely good job of filling in for Grace, reading first of all some of her own work, and then the poetry of Grace Ritz.
I've only known Grace for maybe a year and a half or so, maybe just a little longer. She's part of a group that meets on Monday mornings at Cafe 59, and it's a wonderful way to begin Monday, the dreaded morning of the week for those who still work. Most of us are in that retired category. So I think Grace's work is great. I'm going to at least start with one of her short poems, and then I'll probably introduce you to a few of the other. This is the Cafe 59 book, so there are all of us in here, and my voice too. This is a poem by Grace called Procedures, and I think of it as a snapshot poem. See what you think. My mother had a mangle iron in the basement, below the common bustle of our unruly home. She sat in the cordial cellar, taking wrinkled sheets and making them hotel crisp. My traveling salesman father saw hotel rooms as cozy havens of indulgence, unlike 51 Northrop Place, where we kids kept up our necessary racket. I remember creeping down after school to watch Mom while she ironed. She seemed content, turning out order amid the chaos of laundry and kids and taskmaster. We were glad to be straightened out and folded into the origami of her days. So that's one that I really like by Grace. Can I steal a little more of her voice first? This is called Beltane. And when I looked through this book today, I thought, well, I was feeling a little bit of spring, and that's what Grace is talking about here. It's too early to think about summer, but I'm galloping toward it anyway. The moon is the color of anything goes, and my heart is beating as if you were already here. Because it's love we want, May through August, when the air is nearly breathless, and we are burned into dancing and baying at the stars and rollicking in the weedy garden. The night goes on and on. The sleepless grasshoppers encourage the daring leaps we practice. Hurry, hurry, we know how brief the moment is. So that's the second one by Grace. And, okay, I'm going to get up the courage now to read something by me. And this is a childhood memory poem, and it's called Kitchen Dances. The sun makes it happen on the old linoleum, scrubbed weekly. There is little or no shine left. Still some days I spy a shaky gossamer display, an array of glimmering light and shadow on the spot below the long, roughly framed window where we eat. But on an icy morn of dull, layered, bilious clouds, no indoor shimmery hope sign shows. Cheer is blotted. The oatmeal lumps grows cold, and the hot tea, newly brewed, usually comforting, tastes watery and weak. On this day, I tacitly live out my first grade hunger strike. My mother's wrath adds to the sunless, crooked circle to contrive a blurred and lifelong traumaed memory. No school that gray day. I stayed put as sentenced. From the hard wooden chair, I watched slow dripping icicles disappearing while creating dangerous slippery puddles that await victims in a too narrow driveway between close houses. Tomorrow, the bright shafts of light appear and dance again. Mother presses a yellow spring polka-dotted dress. Miss Collins, with dark plaited hair, welcomes my return. That was a kind of first grade memory that I still have, and you know, it seems like every moment of those many hours my mom said, sit there, are etched in my memory. And I have my stuff and other people's stuff about our mothers. This is something about a woman who I knew when she was a young mother, and then what happened. Danger. When she could no longer place the Scrabble tiles in any sequence that made recognizable words, and her maiden daughter tied up her thin hair, kept her clad and cleaned and wheeled her about, she would often yell out a single word, danger. Once she had worn great costumes, heavily jeweled, and sported enormous white fur collars in winter, then ornate crinoline full skirts in spring and summer. Once she pounded the family piano as her stemless specs hung down on a quaintly fashioned frail lorgnette. Those full decades swam away amid teams of grandchildren. Now she is driven, compelled to warn all who hear of the dread only she knows and others can't yet see. As we rotate days for a quilt of final company, her words, once glib and lilting, ebb to only one, danger. I'm going to try to find another poem about a mother. I think it's called Prophetess. I resemble my mother so much so that I was sure her mailman, who was my old high school boyfriend, would mistake me for her if I met him at her door. I did anyway, but quickly introduced myself. My mother shows me. In 20 years, and disposes me kindly toward my aged self. Already my hands with their brown spots are becoming hers, and my hair under the Claro number 27 is whitening too. Although dementia has stolen her spoken words, I feel intimately connected with her as if she is my older self. I see her loveliness, her physical agility, her neatness and manners, her occasional playfulness, and rejoice that some things do not fade. I can only hope that her fate will not be wholly mine. The potential loss of language and memory is so frightening that I cherish every chance to express myself in words that are still retrievable before they fly off into confusion and I become mute. That Cafe 59er's name is Pat, and she's wintering in Florida. Pat McLean is, and she'll come back with some great work, and sometimes you might see it in the paper. This one is, I have to go to other Cafe 59ers to find humor. I don't find it in my own poetry, so a little bit of humor. And just different. This poem contrasts some things, and then I think he has a bit of a surprise ending. Each morning, my mother braided my hair and sent me off to school, a simple act of love. Every morning, the boy behind me at school pulled my braids, a simple act of hate. As time went on, my mother grew proficient at tying up my hair, and the boy behind me proficient at ravaging my hair. Eventually, the acts of the boy loomed larger than the care of my mother, until the day he tied my braids to his bike handlebars and started to ride away, teaching me some simple facts. Braids attached to handlebars can cause one to run very fast. Trust only your mother with your hair. And mean boys on bikes can grow up to become school administrators. That's my friend Mary Herbst, and I love her humor. And there are a couple of other short ones by Mary, if you'll listen. Adolescent fear. I did not know I could be shot in the back until a fateful program one night started the road to fear. As I walked home in the dark, every shadow was suspect. I could not see behind me, so I walked sideways, but that did not work. I still had a back to protect, so I walked along, taking wide circles at regular intervals, while every noise raised my heartbeat. Then home at last, the lights were on and danger gone, because no one could shoot me from behind if I slept on my back. How many of you are old enough to remember a very, very scary TV program called Lights Out on Monday nights? And I had the same experience after watching that program at a friend's, because we didn't have TV, of trying to get home as fast as I could, because I was sure I was going to be done in that night. Okay, let's see. Two more by Mary, and then I'll mix it up. The plight of the worry gene. The worry gene is nocturnal. Darkness stimulates it. It reaches into my frontal lobe and finds a path to vulnerabilities. Forget the present, the worry gene shouts. Wake up now, think of a problem, another one that you can't solve. It asks, why sleep when you can despair? The worry gene is cruel. It takes away sleep, crushes any possible solutions, points to every chance of things getting worse. Some night I'm going to push the worry gene off the nearest bridge into the water. I hope it can't swim. Then it will understand what extinct means. I'm going to tell you really like it. Last one by Mary. Mullygrubs. Mother knew the cure for mulligrams. She pronounced this day is a do-nothing day. Work was off limits until the next sunrise. She then moved to a chair with a book or a crossword puzzle. The rest of us moved around her. We did only what had to be done because we decided to be a do-nothing family for a day. My mother never had the mulligrams, and neither did we. My Aunt Lucille never relished a do-nothing day. She may have had a case of chronic mulligrams. She continually cooked and cleaned and occasionally visited us, but hopefully not on a do-nothing day, when we hid behind the door and pretended not to be home. This is a very short poem by a poet that you may know of. Her name is Evelyn Grady, and she has written a lot of very good things. This is her briefest, or one of them. Joy. They arrived unannounced, crowded into my soft green kitchen. My mother, Patricia, my aunts, Marie, Irene, Catherine, my grandmother, Margaret, even my great-grandmother, Bridget, with her mother, Margaret. A circle of crones warming their hands on china teacups, laughing, beaming, sharing the joy. Marnie, my daughter, gave birth to a daughter. Her name is May. For everyone who has celebrated intergenerationally, even when the generations before us aren't physically present, I think that is a great poem. And it tells us all where we come from. And many people have written about where they come from. We, as I said, are mostly in that crone stage that Evelyn refers to, but we have a little child with us who is 27 years old and writes with us, and her name is Sarah Rees, and you may have heard of her. She's done a lot in Buffalo lately. And her poem is, one of her poems is called City Lights. Look for people with their lights on, my father says. Some days the city is on fire. People don't drop their bags to dance. We barely say hello. But sometimes when we meet eyes, smile, I feel the touch of 1,000 hands, a wick that catches flame. An old man with cracked hands, muddy yellow raincoat, steers a shopping cart down a slushy sidewalk. His cans rattle louder with each sidewalk slab. It's the sound of coming home. I say hello. He replies, hallelujah, and his 2 teeth make a peace sign. His gray hair hangs with grease, but the wind still picks it up and holds what we don't. And that's Sarah Rees, young person. Can you take any more? Yeah? Okay. I'll go back to the back of our book, go back and forth here. This is a poem called Wrong, and it's one of mine. And the occasion for the writing of this poem was being invited to a birthday party for a 95-year-old woman. I knew her sons, I knew her daughter-in-law. We were all high school friends, so a lot of memories. But I'll read this and then I'll give you a couple more details. Gone wrong. Count the ways, zero in. The iceberg tip of dishonesty and greed infects our lives, renders us morally crippled. Twisted lies born of baseness and perversion by hate hucksters who belie our common good, caring not that they divide fellow countrymen. their drumbeat, preaching two-faced selfishness, ignores those with less and the truly poor. Embrace and hold your personal wealth. Flee from the states that tax. Find loopholes. Enjoy the havens where wealth is hoarded. Build McMansions. Have bigger pools. Brag to captive audiences you can muster. Tinsel up your private lives with bling. Or if your personal preference runs to guns, stock up rather. Heed the sacred right. Take care with whom you share your table. Bring no folk of other shades or hues. Extended guests should pay their way. Another generation's friends, not welcome. Charge those who claim or wish a seat. And if antiquated generosity rears a tinge, make mom's next birthday a dish to pass affair and sleep in the comfort zone of less wrong. The invitation that I had gotten said that I could come if I sent a check for $40 and there would also be a cash bar. For those of you lucky ever to have mothers live to 95, don't do that, okay? I don't really think it's a great thing to do. And I hope you're not invited to one of those parties. Marge Norse is another one of the luminaries, really, at Cafe 59. And this poem is called Fabric. Everything is oblique. The way we walk when our leg is hurting. Swaying on an apron of earth, the mud oozing between our toes, as contemplation must, then the look into the heart. First our own, then the other, the third eye pierces, and then we know shadow from the sun. Human growth has tentacles, many arms, some embrace to set us free, others choke off what lifeblood, what encouragement is. It is only later that we know this. It is only after many twists and journeys. Sometimes we must hang our stories on the line, let them dry, feel their soft billows or hard, dry cloth. I will stop any time that you want me to stop.
Why don't you read one more?
One more? Okay. All right, one more.
Do you have another one by Grace?
I do, and I will think it an honor to read another one of Grace's. And this is for my grandmother in her kitchen. All industry within the hive is service to the queen, and every bee, precise as Bach, brings the world back to her. The path is clear, ordained, lyrical, and no bee leaves without the promise of return. Although much can happen in the course, although some obstacles are fearsome, the necessity of flight compels the mission. So have faith that this goodbye I toss back so easily is filled with the honey-sweet love I learned from you. So again, one of them that I read from Grace was for her mother, and that was for her grandmother. So I have more of Grace if you want.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Well, if you do, why don't you do one more, Grace?
I don't get tired of Grace. Okay. What do we see? What do we see when we leave the scene of our romances? The bright red taillights are behind us, so we keep barreling down the road, breath shallow, as if we have no right to as much air as we need. Maybe tap the brakes lightly, but stay in motion. Every time we break up, I'm sure for 2 or 3 days, that freedom is the fountain of youth, that I am weightless. Oh yes, better off the ride, past cajoling, past, should I say it, and risk another eye slant? You know the look. I call it your Charlie Chan freeze. I'm a Dottie Ann, too witless for language. You're the famous detective, eliminating suspect. You don't wait for me to wise up. Instead, I'm checking my BlackBerry for reconciliation messages. None in sight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Keller.
You're welcome.
We can't have Grace with us today, but certainly Grace's spirit is running throughout all the poetry of the Cafe 59 group. And very, very good stuff. I have to tell a little Grace Ritz story. A number of years ago, I ran into Grace, and she said that this is some time ago, she was teaching a course, I think it was at Canisius, and she said that she was using one of my poems in her class. I was flattered, of course, and I asked her why she was using one of my poems, and she said because it related to, she told me what the topic was. And I said, Grace, that poem has nothing to do with that topic. And she said, yes it does, you just don't know it does. So, anyway. David Landry is a wonderful poet, a man of intense sensitivity, immense consciousness, and a sense of poetics that is especially contemporary. It's my pleasure to present, not to use, that's the next one, to present David Landry.
By the way, Sarah Reese is reading out at Northtown at this very moment. I think I'm using you tonight to try to bring myself back to something that is ancient history. I suppose I'm trying to explain as much to myself as to you about a book I have been working on, often with long lapses, mostly long lapses, I think, since 1973. The title is Divorce Poems and Dinner Table Scenes. Very cheery stuff. It began with the first part, divorce poems. Dinner Table Scenes came along a little later. The divorce poems are dramatic monologues in many voices, the central voice being that of one Pierre. So you might hear Pierre speaking to a specific person or to himself, and you might hear the others speaking to Pierre, or perhaps, and I am by no means certain when this is the case, Pierre has invented the others to speak to him, as perhaps he invents himself, consciously or otherwise. Dinner table scenes are all in a voice that appears to be that of Pierre, and they are simply lyrics addressed to no one in particular. It struck me those 48 years ago that I was surrounded by the condition of divorce. I had not yet read William Carlos Williams' statement in Patterson that divorce is the sign of knowledge in our times. But my mind seemed headed in that direction. The very word began to haunt me, whereupon I discovered that it means, at root, the very natural process of turning away from, that therefore we must all face it in our living. Rather like Robert Duncan commenting on Charles Olson's obsession with Heraclitus, man is estranged from that with which he is most familiar. A judgment that Duncan saw as a statement of our natural condition. That is, we are, perforce, estranged, naturally and inevitably from whatever is before our eyes, from life, from ourselves. That living consists not in curing the estrangement, but in finding a way to live with it productively. Still, it's equally natural to resist both estrangement and divorce. There, it seems to me now, is the core of what this labor has been about. At the very beginning, I wrote down Lyle Glazier's line in Orchard Park in Istanbul, "There is such a surfeit of beauty here," and began my process by seeking a sequence of poems written in hopes of discovering the radical principle of strength that shot forth in a barren time, a twisted, multifolded, convoluted bush of human grief. So my first lines were, "Pierre, don't let the last divorce be yours." I won't read that first poem. I'll move on to something a little later in it. I'm not going to identify the voices because it could hurt some people. I don't think anybody's here. A man should be free to think aloud at home. What's home for, if not release of deeper currents of feeling, of rhythms from the substrate? What honesty can come from silence? I think to music played loud, a Mozart clarinet, soprano solos ringing room to room. Why can't she understand the need? She says I drown her in this close world of notes, of throbs, of local undercurrents, and the baby cry. But haven't women always had to listen? Should he lie bathed in tears and urine? Could the race survive? And how to live if I could not at home release the anguish born each day amid the petty infights, outcasts, counterpoint to current life? Alone. What's the product of being alone? Why want it? They don't know I'm here, but you know. What curious release of rhythms when I'm apart from all out there, of flesh, my heart's delight. How can reading be enactment of my story, and what light from saying in the dark? But talk with them, what has it brought? And wherefore insubstantial thought? Is it thought or substance or random images wrought from them, from memories and dreams of acts and of love, of play and pain, utopian institutes of the mind? What would you do with the rest of your life? Wife, who knows me, knows my need to be apart from you, to be alone. The cheer gets cheerier. Conjure, man. If you can't dream, set yourself. Rock in place, call it up, call it up, call it. Render memories in what you don't recall. Plumb the moment of the fall, freeze it, seize it, throw it in her face, numb the pain. But don't strain. Ease back, deep breath. Give free rein to anguish, hatred, mortified love, the swelling muscle in the groin, the death of your illusions of constancy and oneness, the raptured messianic vision that you lead them, all your friends and children, into blissful comprehension of their own, and strike home. Like this. You don't see him. No one does. Not the man behind the kindly mask, soft voice singing of the earth, of drifters down and out in this man's country, rhythms of the rails of Lakers, liners, trucks and hacks and cycles of the highways, cinders, dirt roads, dust bowls, alleys, seedy flats of revolutions always pending. The working stiff against the crowd of rip-off, inter-office shadow figures, pushers of the paper pills, drivers of the dream machine, makers of the mushroom cloud. He's everybody's friend. They love him in the inner circle, ask him to their very center, suburban sanctuary for their brats, and he caters to their every fear. But watch the darting, small bore eye that looked both ways for so long now. It's out of orbit, looks beyond me, flits according to who's near. But I'm supposed to be his stay, keeper of the open house, his base of operation, grounded on Marxist sands that long ago were washed away in tears until you came my way. But look now at yourself, your posture of sympathy for woman's lot and liberal cause. When I learned that you were like the rest, I took my own direction, worked incessantly and built a separate world, a locus for, a matrix of the mind and art. And why? You showed the folly from the start. I'm not one of the good old boys. across the great pathed field of childhood ignorance, never thinking I would one day watch others play as I and my son, my father, watched me, just when I was sure that no one knew my loneness, how I tamped the trodden earth and knew crevasses deep and wide as worms and rivulets could make in each new season, wet and running wild with joy and free, or so I thought. I tore from contact with the world just there and near my inmost, heart-long, keen-felt love of every tiny leaf and blade that earth affords. What did I fear? What do we all? What do I still? What seizes on my spirit until all I claim is objects of my love and subjects of my will to know just why we share this frame and care for one another, fall behind the train that rushes past the field and path, and for just now evacuate my memory and concern? Who hears me, and who sees the head bob up from clover, weed, and bed of spider, and who shares the dread of losing all that's dear, yet vibrates with the thrill of casting off and nestling back, and never knows that she is seen? In the midst of happiness, the soul's dark night descends, and the wonder of it, that we can even regain the daily ground, wonder at it. Shall we one day not revive? And to what movement lost, what presence, what simple touch, denied, divorced, turned back, backs turned, twisted, cold? This is the last I'll read from Divorce Poem. It starts with an epigraph from Charles Olson and Maximus III, The Initiation of Another Kind of Nation. How can I have so many memories and so little past? Years fuse and seal the well-being, well-meaning, fine intentions, paved path, hiding, source, origin of all spent time and space, mine and mime, stopped this day and night with me. So as I got into this, I realized that divorce meant more than a couple splitting up. It meant pretty much the condition of estrangement throughout the society. And along came 3 12-poem sequences that got printed in this chapbook by Jen Daniels, intermezzi to divorce poems and dinner table scenes. I don't know where they're going to fit in any volume I ever get done, if I ever get it done. But they're here, and there are 3 parts. And the first part is called Bought and Sold. The first couple of poems are set in the state of Maine, as you'll be able to tell immediately. All you see is little shops and people everywhere. Free port, Kenny Bunk, a coastal strip, outlets, no relief. That was number 6. Number 7. No outlet through to being well, a source, a complement to staff of life, bread and water. What a sentence! Even the coast road arcs back to commercial, adds no commerce between us, wrong way, go back. And then the second part's finding work. It actually has titles. Barry Nicholas tells me all poems should have titles. I tell him, no, they shouldn't. It only biases the reader. Anyway, these do. And in fact, the titles mean something, but I'm only reading a couple. The first one's Omnibus. Mostly silence on and off. The bus moves to town, to busy centers, commerce. We rise and fall according to our goal, to join or leave, rejoice or grieve, and end the day. Another, puzzled again, to know or not, bewail our lot, to arrive home at last. They all had to do with my being on jury duty. Excelsior. What hope to join the spirit world united in a common love, to rise beyond or on circumference, or to do something, anything, to make, to gain nothing but to sing the only business of the spheres. So the third part is called the daily round. A sudden stillness at the heart of early morning. Birds pause, Human traffic lags, breezeless scent of renewal, green heavy trees tug earthward. Momentary entry to the ground, our venture cast in doubt, in peace, in space, fast to the round, returns as diverse song and pattern vast to translate at our peril. That was number 2 and number 4. The soul is lost, and to find it, we must have it. We must exercise the given demand of the gods, that we be even focused at the center, ready to thrust out upon circumference to listen to the voices. From where? Above? Below? Within the history of our kind, and know there are no names or concepts to hasten progress of the soul when every advance has cast us in strife opposed to earth and stripped our nerves in the face of future, lost to the soul, riven, driven, a trance of witless hordes turned to talk shows, a dearth of force in Whitman's mass, will to endure, much less prevail, excised from us and drowned by profit-taking on the daily rounds. The last 2 in that volume, number 11. The free-form flight along the beach turns, swing low across the strand, streaked and glazed with Maine summer, sunset colors so rich and strewn that surf and sky and sand glow as one, and we inside the flow, a molten globe spun to blend each other and all points in or out, east or west, up or down around our world. And then the last of that sequence, the way happens along the way, and we have lived it, love. Love the seasons here or there, each there a renewal or recovery from loss, and here each time return to re-examine what place may be ours and others, circles of acquaintance, contact with the ground. The last ones are from the dinner table scenes, although sometimes they're breakfast tables or lunch tables or imaginary tables. The first 2 in the volume, the first 5, I think, in the volume altogether, have to do with a family that I knew for many years that lived in Orchard Park. The first couple of poems have to do with the father of the family, and then there are 3 poems dealing with the daughters. Beyond the kitchen window, a hill or wall. The woman fronts me, face still, eyes down or past my head, her back to the fall dead wall until my dinner ends. She approaches the October brush to rush dessert, hand-picked as the bread is baked by the slight man on my right. Third point of this pyramid of gloom, fulcrum of other triangles, each a misshapen block in the tomb of marriage. She bolts the pears and from the table tears the fabric, disappears into her room. It too runs aslant the backyard hill, rising against her vision and his will. Cars on the crest skim the ronger, then sink from sight. Cattle on the rim drop into meadows, onto Massachusetts, buffalo, turkey, places where the poet's imagination in the dusk can pass through mountains of Vermont which close in around his voice. How can it abound so with love when she prefers not to hear the sound of his choice? The scene changes in the next one to New York City. But love changes meaning from woman to man to woman, from place to place. Face to face with sex, homo, and bi in the tiny Thai restaurant in the city, I hear their pity for what I lack. Backs to the window, 2 men become assigned and cover their plan with a laugh at me and at the man on my right who might yearn to go their way another day, but who tonight takes my side to guide me through his world and brace me amid theirs. They test and probe, going back to your room so soon? They try me, ply me, see what I can bear. Why? Do they fear me and what they know of scorn from my world? Or do they jeer me and what they don't know of early morn in ours? Parting at 56th and 9th, the ritual of embrace. Embarrassed, warm. Our worlds meet like globes which can touch only in a point until we glance away in reflection. This is utterly different, and the scene is Arizona. There is no twilight in Green Valley. Swift passage into night leaves only shades of black, of mountain against sky, of cars against the foothills, beyond the restaurant glass as they pass out of sight. I alone look. Mother, back to the window, studies the face of him to my left. He looks ahead or down so often now as if he sees no trace or any shade of dark or light. Since they cut the disc of fever from him, he hunches up his lung against the pain. His heart and kidney fail now and again, but he looks ahead or down and sets his will in silhouette against the dark terrain. You talked about, you wrote a poem about the childhood kitchen. This is one, too. Frozen, stiff-legged dungarees thawing in the corner by the back door, cellar to the right, backyard to the left, and through the door across the hall, inside the same apartment in reverse. What life, what angry voices and what curse resound behind the mirrored door. At whom? At me? And why I sit with milk and cookies as my mother bakes and makes the kitchen warm, the secret buried deeper than our love can reach, is wide, is recollected, or she asks if I got down to bare concrete, and is there glare upon the stair, and where did I leave it? Is the project complete? Will I dawdle all my life away, leave all to the last? Nothing in its place, not time, not sopping socks, not charts of baseball figures, card game scores, and minute data of a childhood of unfinished, undeveloped, unimagined dream time spent in hiding from the storms or making snowballs idols in artificial grief. Post-war northeast winds lash the cheap prefab duplex walls of emotion, built on small plots, naked save for scrub and twig and snow, while little lives are still around yellow, slip-top, expandable, metal-legged, unscrew-yourself-to-move kitchen table. Rage, compressed in overheated space, seeks exit from the boxed-in life, unable to grow full or to find its proper room. When walls are so thin, no place is sacred, no heart can hold, and what frail vessel will not spill its fluid onto covered floor? How many New Year's Eves we've shared extended ceremony of food and drink savored slowly in affection. Kitchen, of course, the venue. Tables, cheap veneer, no barrier. Nor even chairs' discomfort blocks the yearly rumination. Yes, Lacuni, voyages to a world elsewhere, but our recovery of selves each time, each other shared jokes sustained to buoy a vision of the possible amid despair and deaths. The perfidy of those undead, or were they ever born, who draw blood so freely, lacking any substance of their own, spent in greed and cynicism. Might think of a couple of colleagues there. The man across the table, I've dreamt that I can fly. And we, oh, how we pick it up and run, pleased to foster dreams of reaching out beyond control, beneath the near, above the days, years and decades, meeting in mid-sentence as if we never strayed. She to my left rises as Times Square beckons in its frenzy, says, how nice it is so simply to relax and shed the burdens. And my wife smiles softly in time to share the rhythms of the distant crowd's delight. Enough. Thanks for the chance to sort of re-energize myself in regard to
David Landry. Just a bit of a preview of coming attractions. As you all know, April is Poetry Month. Consequently, we will be having 2 prose readers in April. Howard Wolf and Mary Balmer, who's a West Coast novelist who's just had a novel rather well received. And in March, I said before, I will be, I did what was almost a Freudian slip. I said produce rather than present. Well, in March, it is a matter of production. First of all, I will be one of the featured readers. I'm very excited about that. And the other featured reader, for anyone who's read my poetry, you know how many poems I have addressed or that have been inspired by my son, Peter Mendy Sibaki, who is presently a doctoral candidate at Princeton in neuroscience. But he also has written a number of plays and poetry, and he will be the other reader. So I'll be able to read some of those poems that I read about Peter, or that I wrote about Peter, and there will even be some by him that sort of respond to them so many years after. So I'm excited about that. That will be on March 23rd. So I hope some of you, or all of you, can come. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful evening. Have some cookies and